Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. All right, that is out the way. What's up, everybody? Supreme Decisions here, and today we're going to be talking about what happens or what are your rights if you are bitten by a police dog or K-9. Now, the reason why I actually decided to even bring this up is because I've actually had a couple people call me in regards to what direction they could go in. And I'm going to kind of touch on some of the options that you have and what allows for these options to be available. Now, if you're bitten by a police dog, also called a K-9, you may have legal rights and remedies, especially if the use of force was excessive or unjustified. Now, here's going to be a quick breakdown of your rights. Now, the reason why I actually kept in the could be and may have, like the hypotheticals, is simply because not every time a K-9 is released, then it bites you, do you have an actual remedy, right, other than medical assistance. And this is what the guidelines are. Because again, you have Fourth Amendment protections from excessive force. Now, police dog bites can qualify as use of force. And under the Fourth Amendment, you are protected from unreasonable or excessive force by law enforcement. Now, the reason, again, I'm using the could be, might be's, and all that is, again, because every time a police officer uses force doesn't make it excessive. Every time a police dog bites you, it is not considered excessive because there are guidelines in which it is feasible for the necessary force that the tool, because that's what the dog is labeled as, a tool, a law enforcement tool. And the use of that tool, such as a taser, there are guidelines for it. So just because you're bitten, you may want to have a conversation with somebody like myself that can actually tell you if you have a case. And this is, again, why I bring this up, because not everybody will have a justifiable case other than medical attention. Now, if a dog bites you during an arrest or encounter where the level of force was not justified by the circumstances, it may be a constitutional violation. Now, again, this is one, I believe, a video that actually surfaced, last week, where there was a parade in Chicago, and the police dog got loose, and ran and jumped on several people and ended up biting this young boy. And when they finally got the dog off the boy, the police yelled at the boy to get away from them. That is an excessive force because, again, it is not justified with that level of force, and it was not justified within the circumstances because, again, there was no crime. The little boy was literally just standing there, and the dog went up to him and bit him. Now, the police officers are also at fault because they did not offer at any point medical assistance to this child that had just been bitten. Now, if I can find a video, I'm actually put it up on the channel so you can see what I'm talking about. But the whole point is that is an example of it's not justified and it doesn't rise to the level of that use of force. Now, a case that you may want to look up is Chu v. Gates. It's a Ninth Circuit case, in 1994. The court held that the use of a police dog to locate and bite a suspect may amount to excessive force under the Fourth Amendment. Because notice what it says, locate and bite. That is why the animal is considered a tool. Just like it's working like a GPS. These are the things in which you will classify this as whenever you're putting together your lawsuit. Because again, these are things that you can bring. Because you have to file a federal civil rights lawsuit, 42 USC 1983. If your rights were violated, you may be able to sue the police department or officers involved under 1983 for damages. Now, in this, one of the things that's always available to you when you're bitten by the dog is your medical expenses. You may not have to sue for that, but you do have medical expenses that they are liable for. And that's generally the police department as well as the officer that's supposed to be supervising the K-9. Pain and suffering, not in all cases, but in some cases. Emotional distress, again, not in all cases, some cases. Punitive damages. Now, punitive damages will be for long-term effects from the dog bite. Give you an example. There was a young man here in Dallas, Texas. He was bitten by a dog during the arrest. Well, the dog was yanking on him whenever they was trying to pull him apart. They ended up pulling this man's shoulder out of place. Well, that's now a lifetime injury for this young man. So the police department now is paying him, technically, for the rest of his life. So he's getting multiple payments, but it's for the rest of his life. Now, here's the thing. Two things you must prove. The officer acted under color of law. That is simple because most of them have no idea what law is, and their actions are generally not based in anything legal. Two, the use of force, the dog bite, was excessive or unreasonable under given circumstances. Now, again, even during the arrest, this can be a problem. You have to be able to show that these things caused an injury that was beyond what the arrest was for. Because if you, like, again, give you another one. The young man that, when they were stopping the truckers, I want to say this was about a year ago. And the young man jumped out the truck, laid down on the ground, put his hands behind his head. They released the dog on him. That's an excessive force complaint issue because he had already surrendered. His hands were behind his head and he was laying down flat on the ground when the dog was released. So that, again, that's an action by the officer under color of law. And then the force was excessive because there was no resisting. Now, the next part of this are state law tort claims. Now, I generally don't, how do I put it? I do not say, hey, let's go to state court. For me, the fastest way to get what you're looking for is to get away from state court because you're more likely to have a judgment against you in state court than you are federal court. Why? Because in state court, they run by a different set of rules and it's generally not by law. In federal court, they're forced to abide by law. So the state court claims, because there are some people that actually go forward with them, in addition to federal civil rights claims, you may be able to file a state personal injury claim for battery, negligence, or gross negligence. Now, again, the example of the truck driver. He can actually have a claim of battery and gross negligence. Why? Because he had already surrendered when the dog was released. There was no reason for the dog to be released. So therefore, the gross negligence was outside the scope of the duties of not only the trainer, but the actual dog itself, the tool. Now, many states have their own laws about police liability. Some provide immunity to officers unless the conduct was malicious or grossly negligent. The releasing of a dog while someone's laying on their stomach with their hands behind their head, surrendering, is gross negligence. These are things that allow you to go out and be compensated. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to teach you for the most part. Now, due process protections under the 14th Amendment. In some cases, especially if you were not resisting or already subdued, a dog bite may violate your substantive due process rights under the 14th Amendment, particularly when the force was wanton and malicious. Like I said, the greatest example of that is the young man who got out the truck. He laid on the ground, put his hands behind his head, and then they released the dog. He was not resisting. Or even the young man that was in handcuffs. And I want to say North Carolina. He was handcuffed, and they released the dog on him. That is, again, already subdued. It violated his due process rights. It violated his freedom from excessive force because it was not justified. And that violated policy rights simply because there's an actual policy that is against while having a handcuffed subject. Again, there are guidelines. If the subject is handcuffed, even if resisting, is not allowed to release the dog on them unless there are other caveats that have to be available to you in order for that to be a justified action. Now, the right to medical attention. This is the one where you always have this right. You have the right to be seen. If you are bitten and detained, you have the right to medical attention. Denial of medical treatment after a dog bite could violate the 8th Amendment for people that are going into jail, or the 14th Amendment. Why the 8th? Because it's a penalty. It's like why a lot of states don't have the death penalty, because those things are excessive, and you have the right to be free from those. Now, the body camera and K-9 unit records. This is the fun part, because this is the one thing that you can always do on the aftermath or even during prior to getting prepared for trial. You have the right to request records. They may help your claim, such as body cam footage, K-9 training records, incident records, use of force documentations, and even the records and certifications of the trainers. I actually didn't write that down, but you still have the right to the record from the trainers or the handlers. And that's what they're called in some situations. Let me get a sip of this yak. It's actually water. All right. Now, this can be done through a public records request through the Freedom of Information Act. This is also can be done through discovery. And this is also one of my favorite things, because again, when I talk about the detailed discovery, these are things that should be put into it if you still have a criminal case. Statute of limitations. Now, here's the great part about this. Now, part of this is when you're doing the claims, while it's a civil rights claim, the dog, the tool, has a lifespan. And that's generally 2 to 3 years. So when you're doing your claims, the dogs still pretty much need to be alive or need to still be part of the department. Because if it's not, that is an escape for the police. That is an escape for liability even for the officer. because I've given you the statute where even the federal, and I actually showed you FBI.gov. What did I say? FBI.gov showed you the statute of limitations for civil rights violations, showed you the statute of limitations for human rights violations, right? But when you're talking about this, the general time limit for these, for your federal claim will be 3 years maximum. The state claims, it will vary from 1 to 3 years. So state requires immediate action, while federal, you still have a little bit of time. Government claims often must file a notice of claim within 6 months. Now, that's a caveat because the notice of claim is going to be sent because it's just like a notice to sue. These things, when you're suing the state, there's a transactional piece that goes along with it, and it deals in a 6-month increment. Why? Because you need a response, and that's what they have in there. So make sure you understand timelines, because again, what I talked about, when you're missing timelines, that's when you actually are becoming detrimental to yourself. Now, situations where use of a police dog may be unjustified. Now, I gave you one where you're not suspected of a serious crime. Yeah, if you got a tail light out, that's not a crime that they should be releasing the dog on you. You were already restrained or surrendering. The young man from the truck laying on the ground. Dog deployed without warning. Notice what that says. The dog was deployed without warning. That you're just sitting there and they just let the dog loose. That is a violation. The dog continued to bite you after you were subdued. Now, this actually happened in New York, and the young man, not only was he bitten and taken down, the police, it was 3 officers around him, and they actually couldn't get the dog to stop biting him. That's an excessive force claim because the dog, after you were subdued, was still biting. And even after that, you have a remedy. Now, seek medical care and document your injuries. Now, here's something, because they're not going to tell you this. Most people will not tell you this. You're going to go to, let's say you're injured, and they take you to the hospital. The police take you to the hospital prior to booking you. What you also need to do is make sure when you are seen, that these doctors understand that you are going to be filing a separate medical claim. The reason why you're doing that is because now your records become part of your police booking. I want you to catch that. And when it becomes part of your booking, the police are the ones that have to give the hospital permission to actually release those records because they are the ones paying for it. I want you to catch that, because you'll think, oh, okay, I went to the hospital, they're just going to release it. No, because you're under someone else's insurance at that point. What you need to do is let them know you are filing a separate claim against this incident. By doing that, that now puts it under your actual medical records so you can do a medical request directly from the hospital and not the police department. Just keep that in mind, because that is one of the things that you need to do to actually protect yourself and weaponize any action against you. Take photographs of the wounds and gather evidence. Now, keep in mind, even after, because a lot of times they take you there, they're not going to turn over the actual photos that they take when you are first part of intake. They're not going to turn those over. You're going to have to fight like hell to get them. Even after they're dressed, you have an opportunity to then take pictures after you've been seen medically. And those photos, most of the time, work just as well. Now, request records, the body cam, which you're probably not going to get, or it's going to be heavily redacted. All reports and medical records, if they don't give it to you at the hospital. Just keep that in mind. And now they can't and make sure that you're keeping track of everyone you speak with and their response. Always understand that as well, because the doctors have a separate insurance in which you can file against. Contact a civil rights or personal injury attorney, or seek the guidance of a qualified legal consultant. It's in the description. And consider filing a claim with the police department or your local citizens review board. Now, here's the long and short. The filing of the complaint, and I shouldn't have put police department. I meant post. Police officers, standards and trainings, certification department, because they are the ones in which you can actually go after not only the certification of the dog, but the certification of the trainer or handler. These are things that help you stay free and also get bad police officers off the force and get them out of policing. So if you have a dog bite, you have opportunities and you have options. These are things that you can do and use. So, Supreme, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.